The gravest crime that Donald Trump ever committed was to undermine democracy, the will of the people, by trying to overthrow a free and fair election. And today, we saw the first signs that justice may be coming for him. Today, we learned that the ex-president received a letter from the special counsel, Jack Smith, indicating that he is the target of a criminal investigation into efforts to interfere with the presidential election of 2020, leading to the insurrection on January 6, 2021. According to Trump, the special counsel gave him a 4-day deadline in which to speak to the Washington, D.C. grand jury hearing the case. It's an offer he will almost certainly not accept, seeing that anything that he says can then be used against him in a subsequent trial. And all of this indicates that the Department of Justice is wrapping up what has been a long and sprawling investigation led by this man, Jack Smith, for the past 8 months. We do not have any indication of what the exact charges are that Smith is considering. And the ex-president said himself, a target letter like this, quote, almost always means an arrest and indictment are coming. That's exactly what happened just last month when Jack Smith sent Trump another target letter regarding the investigation into the mishandling of classified documents. And just days after that letter became public, Smith brought a 37-count indictment against the ex-president, charging him with 7 federal crimes. Of course, that was already the second indictment against Trump this year, following the 34 counts of falsifying business records charged by this man, the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, in April. But this indictment, the third against the ex-president, and if and when it comes, will be by far the most consequential. While some people might argue that the charges about Donald Trump's business practices in New York, for instance, don't really matter, or they just don't care that much about the documents at Mar-a-Lago, there's just no way for a reasonable person with elementary critical thinking skills to deny the seriousness of this case. This is about a real and existential threat to our nation. It's about Donald Trump's attempt and his continuing attempts to undermine and possibly end our democracy as we know it. And in fact, there's already been a long and thorough investigation into this, resulting in the recommendation of multiple criminal charges. That was done by the House January 6th committee. Last year, they methodically laid out the evidence against the ex-president, showing the American people exactly how he attempted to remain in power against their will. He knew that he had lost the 2020 election, but he spread the lies about the fraud anyway. And his own attorney general at the time, Bill Barr, said this to the committee.
The president said something like, well, we could get to the bottom. Some people say we could get to the bottom of this if the department sees the machines. It was a typical way of raising a point. And I said, absolutely not. There's no probable cause, and I'm not going to seize any machines. I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office, and caught up to me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Now, that January 6th committee also detailed how Trump launched a massive pressure campaign to try to get nearly all corners of the government to do his bidding, including his own vice president.
He tried to pressure state legislatures to reverse the results of the election in their states, but they refused. He tried to enlist the Department of Justice in his efforts to overturn election results, but officials leading the department refused to comply. So eventually, he latched on to a completely nonsensical and anti-democratic theory that one man, his own vice president, could determine the outcome of the election. He wanted the vice president to unilaterally select the president.
And of course, on the advice of his own lawyers, Mike Pence decided that that was not his role. Donald Trump then summoned a violent mob of his supporters, hurling them at the Capitol in a bloody attack on American democracy.
Trump has given us marching orders. One post on the Donald.win wrote, basically, if you're east of the Mississippi, you can and should be there. Advance on the Capitol.
One user asked, is the 6th D-Day? Is that why Trump wants everyone there? Another asserted, Trump just told us all to come armed.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
That was the former White House aide, Cassidy Hutchinson, recounting how Trump wanted the mags removed. Those are magnetometers that help detect guns. At the end of the January 6th investigation and after 10 public hearings, the committee referred 4 criminal charges against Donald Trump to the Department of Justice.
We proposed to the committee advancing referrals where the gravity of the specific offense, the severity of its actual harm, and the centrality of the offender to the overall design of the unlawful scheme to overthrow the election compel us to speak. Ours is not a system of justice where foot soldiers go to jail and the masterminds and ringleaders get a free pass.
But until now, that's exactly what's happened. The foot soldiers have gone to jail, and the masterminds and the ringleaders have, for the moment, had a pass. So here we are, 7 months later, at an historic moment with the Department of Justice poised to finally bring charges against the ex-president in the January 6th case. We've already seen and heard the evidence about Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the election and bring down our system of government. And if you believe that evidence, then criminal charges are the only possible response because our democracy itself is at stake.